This Attorney General in Louisiana, Liz Maria, has a vendetta against me.
Boosie Badazz is facing intense public criticism and legal scrutiny after allegations emerged that the image and identity of a deceased college student were used to promote and profit from a commercial music festival. Authorities in Louisiana have begun examining whether the promotional campaign misled consumers and violated state laws related to fraud and consumer protection. At the center of the controversy is a grieving family that says they never gave permission for their son's name, story, or likeness to be used in connection with the event. What makes the situation especially sensitive is that the student, Caleb Wilson, was only 20 years old and had been a dedicated trumpet player associated with Southern University and its respected marching band community. His death, reportedly linked to an alleged fraternity hazing incident, shocked classmates, educators, and communities across the HBCU network, turning his story into a symbol of the dangers surrounding hazing culture in academic environments. Many people across the country followed the news of his passing, expressing grief and calling for accountability, safety reforms, and greater awareness about the risks young students may face in pursuit of belonging and achievement. Against this emotional backdrop, the promotional use of his identity for a for-profit festival created a wave of public concern and moral outrage. Supporters who believed they were contributing to a meaningful tribute or charitable effort began questioning whether their trust had been manipulated through emotional messaging connected to a tragic loss. Critics argue that transforming a family's grief into a marketing narrative crosses ethical boundaries and undermines the dignity of remembrance. The situation has grown beyond ordinary celebrity controversy, evolving into a broader discussion about responsibility, consent, and the limits of promotional storytelling when real human loss is involved. Investigators are now focused on determining whether representations about charitable intentions were accurate, whether any scholarship or memorial fund was formally established, and whether the use of personal identity in commercial promotion occurred without authorization. The outcome of the investigation could carry significant legal consequences if authorities determine that misleading claims influenced public participation or financial decisions. Beyond the legal dimension, the controversy has prompted reflection about how communities respond to tragedy, how public figures exercise influence, and how easily emotional narratives can shape public perception when transparency is unclear. For many observers, the central issue is not only what happened legally, but also what it reveals about the responsibilities that come with visibility, influence, and trust in moments of collective grief. To understand how this entire situation became so complicated, we have to go back to early 2025 and look at what was happening at Southern University after the tragic death of a student named Caleb Wilson. At the time, the campus community was grieving, searching for answers, and trying to process a loss that felt both shocking and deeply personal. Caleb Wilson was not just another student. He was a 20-year-old trumpet player living his dream as a proud member of the university's famous Human Jukebox marching band. Within the HBCU community, the Human Jukebox is widely respected for its musical excellence, discipline, and tradition. Being selected for that band represents years of dedication, practice, and personal sacrifice. Caleb had worked tirelessly to reach that level. He balanced academics with rehearsals, performances, and the responsibility of representing his school with pride and professionalism. Friends and classmates described him as focused, talented, and full of promise for the future. In February 2025, everything changed. During what authorities described as an alleged fraternity hazing incident, Caleb Wilson lost his life. The exact details of the event were placed under investigation, but the impact was immediate and far-reaching. What should have been a moment of brotherhood and unity turned into a devastating loss that shook not only the university, but also the broader network of historically Black colleges and universities across the country. Students at other campuses began questioning long-standing traditions within Greek life organizations. Parents grew concerned about the safety of their children in campus environments that were supposed to support growth and opportunity. Conversations about hazing, accountability, and institutional responsibility began appearing in national discussions, policy meetings, and media coverage. Within the Human Jukebox community, the emotional impact was especially heavy. Band members who had rehearsed, performed, and studied alongside Caleb were forced to continue their responsibilities while coping with grief. Performances that once symbolized pride now carried the weight of remembrance. Faculty and administrators faced the difficult task of supporting students emotionally while also addressing systemic questions about how such a tragedy could occur. The university community was not only mourning a student, but also confronting broader cultural and institutional challenges. For many observers, Caleb's death became a symbol of the dangers associated with hazing culture in America and a reminder of the need for meaningful reform. While the campus community struggled to heal, another development was unfolding outside the university. Boosie Badazz had been building his Boosie Bash festival into a large-scale entertainment event in Baton Rouge. Over several years, the festival had grown from a local gathering into a multi-day rap music event that attracted thousands of attendees from across the region. By 2025, the festival had become a significant business venture involving ticket sales, sponsorships, artist bookings, and promotional campaigns designed to generate widespread attention. Organizing an event of that size required constant marketing momentum and public engagement to ensure strong attendance and financial success. As public attention focused on the tragedy at Southern University, observers later questioned whether the emotional impact of Caleb Wilson's death became intertwined with promotional narratives connected to the festival. The broader context of grief, public awareness, and community conversation created a powerful emotional atmosphere in Baton Rouge and beyond. What had begun as a campus tragedy evolved into a national discussion about responsibility, ethics, and the treatment of loss in public discourse. The situation illustrates how quickly personal tragedy can intersect with public attention, institutional response, and commercial activity. It also demonstrates how moments of grief can shape conversations about accountability, influence, and the boundaries between remembrance and promotion. Ultimately, the events surrounding Caleb Wilson's death did not remain confined to a single campus or a single moment in time. They triggered conversations across universities, families, and communities about safety, respect, and the responsibility to protect students pursuing their dreams. The story became not only about one young musician's life and loss, but also about how institutions, public figures, and communities respond when tragedy and public attention collide. Thousands of people to Baton Rouge. By 2025, this was his 6th year running the event, and he had turned it into a serious business venture. The festival featured major artists like Glow and Dabab, which means Boosie was paying serious money for talent. To make this profitable, he needed to sell a lot of tickets, secure sponsorships, and create buzz that would draw people from across the South. The location on Southern University's campus gave him credibility in the HBCU community and access to a built-in audience of students and alumni. But here's where it gets crazy. Instead of just promoting the music and the artists, Bowie decided to use Caleb Wilson's death as a marketing tool. He announced he was launching a Caleb Wilson Memorial Scholarship and started using the dead student's photograph alongside Southern University and Human Jukebox logos to promote his for-profit festival. This wasn't just a small mention in the promotional materials. Bowie made this scholarship announcement a central part of his marketing campaign. He was essentially telling people that by buying tickets to his festival, they would be supporting a memorial scholarship for a student who died tragically. It was emotional manipulation disguised as community service. Then this happened. Boosie went on interviews talking about how he was working with Wilson's father and others to establish this scholarship using funds from Boosie Bash. He made it sound like this was some beautiful tribute, like he was doing something positive for the community. In one interview, he said, "We're going to try to do something positive because I'm grateful for his dad and all the people who made this work. We're going to do something special for them because it's a life lost too short." The way Bowie presented this made it seem like he had been in close contact with the Wilson family, like they had asked him to help, and like this scholarship was their idea. He talked about being grateful for his dad, as if they had been working together on this project. People who bought tickets probably thought they were supporting a legitimate memorial fund that the family had endorsed. But here's where it gets real. Wilson's parents had no idea any of this was happening. According to the Louisiana Attorney General, the family told them they had not given Boosie consent and knew nothing about their son's name and image being used to promote Boosie Bash. They didn't even know the event was happening. Gang, imagine the shock and pain of finding out that someone is using your dead child's face to sell tickets to a rap festival and you never gave permission for any of it. These parents were still grieving the loss of their son, still trying to understand how the hazing incident happened, still fighting for justice in his death. And now they had to deal with someone exploiting their tragedy for profit. The family. After discovering the shocking misuse of Caleb Wilson's name and image, the Wilson family immediately demanded that all references to their son, including his photograph and any mention of the so-called memorial scholarship, be removed from every promotional material connected to Boosie Badazz Festival. Despite their urgent requests, the damage had already been done. Weeks of promotion had exploited their grief to sell tickets and create hype for the event. The festival organizers had taken a family tragedy and turned it into a marketing campaign, capitalizing on public sympathy without ever obtaining consent from the family. The emotional toll on the Wilsons was immense. They were still processing the loss of their son, grieving a life cut tragically short, and now forced to confront a blatant exploitation of that pain. When news of these actions reached Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill, she did not respond with a simple letter or gentle reminder. Instead, she acted decisively and forcefully. The AG publicly stated that the promoters had taken advantage of a family suffering an unimaginable loss, turning a personal tragedy into a commercial opportunity. She described the behavior as disgusting and emphasized that the festival organizers owed the Wilson family a formal apology, noting that, despite repeated claims, no funds had been placed into the memorial scholarship. The fact that Boosie had promoted the scholarship while failing to provide any financial contribution was critical. This was no longer a question of ethics alone. It had potential legal consequences. The Attorney General's office launched a formal investigation into whether the actions of Boosie Badazz Festival constituted false advertising under Louisiana's consumer protection laws. Using a deceased student's name and likeness to promote a for-profit event without consent is a serious violation of publicity rights. Promoting a scholarship that did not exist in order to generate ticket sales could also be considered fraud. These claims were not taken lightly. Investigators discovered that Boosie's marketing campaign did not merely mention Caleb Wilson once or incidentally. On the contrary, the festival had systematically integrated his story into the core of its promotional materials. Official university logos, human jukebox band imagery, and photographs of Caleb were prominently displayed, creating the illusion that the memorial scholarship was a legitimate, officially sanctioned initiative. The campaign misled attendees, fans, and the general public into believing that buying tickets supported a charitable cause. On November 2025, the Louisiana Department of Justice escalated the matter by issuing a civil investigative demand to Boosie. Unlike a routine inquiry or informal request, this document carries the full force of law, compelling the recipient to provide records, testimony, and evidence related to the investigation. The AG's office demanded clarity on several points: how Caleb Wilson's name and image were used, whether the festival obtained permission from the family, whether any formal agreement existed with Southern University, how much money was raised under the guise of the scholarship, and whether any funds were actually contributed to support Caleb's legacy. These demands were legally binding. Failure to comply could result in contempt of court charges or other criminal consequences. Despite the severity of the situation, Boosie and his team chose to ignore the demands. For months, no responses were sent. Lawyers remained silent, management provided no communication, and no member of the festival staff acknowledged the state's inquiries. This inaction only worsened their legal exposure. Ignoring law enforcement in a potential fraud investigation is never a viable strategy. It signals culpability and forces authorities to escalate enforcement measures. Each day that passed without compliance intensified the pressure on Boosie and his team. By February 19, 2026, the AG's office had had enough. They filed a formal motion to compel in court, asking a judge to order Boosie to provide the requested documentation. The filing outlined in detail the alleged violations of Louisiana law and emphasized the systematic exploitation of Caleb Wilson's story. It included comprehensive evidence showing how the festival leveraged the student's image and the scholarship narrative to boost ticket sales and enhance public perception. The motion was a critical step, representing the final legal measure before potential criminal charges could be filed. The case revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Rather than reaching out to the Wilson family to gain consent or to create a legitimate scholarship, Boosie chose to manipulate the tragedy for personal gain. The investigation demonstrated that this was not an isolated oversight, but a deliberate marketing strategy built on deception. The Attorney General's office was prepared to hold the festival accountable, ensuring that the exploitation of grief for profit would not go unchecked. The situation served as a stark warning to others in the entertainment industry. Using the pain of others to sell tickets, promote events, or generate publicity carries serious legal and moral consequences. It was now clear that the festival's actions could result in significant fines, sanctions, and potential criminal liability if Boosie continued to ignore legal obligations or failed to take responsibility for exploiting a family's loss. Boosie's use of Caleb Wilson's story in his marketing campaign was both blatant and systematic. According to the Louisiana Attorney General, promotional materials for Boosie Badazz prominently featured Caleb's photograph, alongside official Southern University and Human Jukebox logos, none of which had permission to be used. The campaign repeatedly referenced a memorial scholarship as a reason people should attend the festival, creating the illusion that the event had a charitable purpose connected to the students' memory. Officials emphasized that no formal lawsuit had been filed yet, but the investigation was active, and the motion to compel was effectively the last step before potential formal charges. If Boosie continued to ignore the court order, he could face additional contempt charges alongside fraud allegations. But this case was bigger than just an unauthorized photograph. It revealed a clear pattern of behavior, showing that Boosie saw a tragedy and immediately considered how it could benefit him financially. He created a fake scholarship, exploited a dead student's image to market a for-profit event, never sought permission from the family, never funded the scholarship he promoted, and lacked any formal agreement with Southern University. The Attorney General's investigation uncovered multiple legal violations. Using someone's likeness for commercial purposes without consent infringes on publicity rights. Making false claims about charitable donations violates consumer protection laws. Using university logos without authorization breaches trademark law. This was not a single mistake, but a deliberate, systematic scheme to profit from someone else's tragedy. Boosie's responses to the situation revealed even more about his mindset. He replied twice publicly. Once in March 2025, when the AG first threatened legal action, and again on February 21, 2026. Both responses suggested that he fundamentally failed to understand the severity of his actions. In March 2025, instead of apologizing to the Wilson family or trying to remedy the situation, Boosie went on the offensive on social media. He wrote, "But for y'all to say that y'all are taking legal action against someone who is trying to help y'all is a slap in my face and completely wrong when keeping it real goes wrong." He framed the legal action as a personal attack and claimed he was the one being wronged. He positioned himself as a victim of a money grab, despite never actually contributing to the scholarship or obtaining permission from the family. This response highlighted a lack of accountability and a refusal to recognize the pain his actions caused. The second response, on February 21, 2026, further exposed his character. Boosie claimed he had just checked himself out of the hospital due to stress from the lawsuit, writing, "Just got out the hospital. I'm good. Just checked myself out. I let this lady get the best of me with this lawsuit and got me sick." He described the AG's actions as wrong and evil, even suggesting he would file his own lawsuit in retaliation. Shockingly, he immediately mentioned going shopping for the Clarissa Shields boxing fight in Detroit, demonstrating an almost surreal detachment from the gravity of exploiting a family's tragedy. Rather than acknowledging wrongdoing or attempting to make amends, he portrayed himself as a victim and moved on with personal errands. The broader community impact was severe. Students at Southern University expressed outrage on social media, calling the use of Caleb's image disrespectful and hurtful to his family. Many felt betrayed, realizing that their support of Boosie Badazz may have unintentionally contributed to exploiting their fallen classmates' memory. The Human Jukebox community, in particular, was devastated. Band members, still grieving the loss of a close friend, were confronted with his image being used for ticket sales without any input or consent. This exploitation shook the HBCU community, prompting serious questions about how to prevent such abuse in the future. If a celebrity could profit from a student's death without permission, what stopped others from doing the same? Universities began re-examining policies on the use of student images and institutional logos, emphasizing the need for stricter oversight to protect students and their legacies. The scandal highlighted a dangerous precedent, showing how tragedy can be manipulated for profit when proper safeguards are absent, leaving families and communities vulnerable to exploitation. Meanwhile, the Wilson family's grief became even heavier because their tragedy was being manipulated for profit. Losing a child is an unimaginable pain, but having to watch that loss be exploited added a layer of suffering that no family should ever endure. Not only did they have to come to terms with Caleb Wilson's death, but they were suddenly thrust into a legal battle just to protect his memory from being used without consent. They had to hire lawyers, gather documents, and navigate complicated legal proceedings to try and stop someone from using their son's face and name to sell tickets for a music festival. Every hearing, every demand for proof, every motion in court reminded them that their grief was being weaponized for someone else's financial gain. This legal and emotional burden came at a time when they were already processing the shock of losing Caleb, trying to understand what had happened during the hazing incident, and seeking justice for his death. The combination of mourning and legal stress created a near unbearable situation, yet the family persevered, determined to protect Caleb's legacy. This incident fundamentally changed the way people view celebrity charity and public community involvement. It exposed the vulnerability of grieving families when individuals with influence use tragedy to enhance their own image or profits. Boosie's actions showed that someone with a large platform could craft the appearance of helping a community or honoring a lost student while actually doing nothing substantive. This case became a textbook example of performative charity, a situation where the public sees a spectacle of generosity, but the reality behind the scenes is empty promises and personal gain. It made it clear that not every charitable claim in the public eye is genuine, and it emphasized how carefully people need to scrutinize these claims before believing them or contributing. Beyond the family, this situation highlighted significant gaps in consumer protection laws when it comes to charitable claims tied to for-profit events. When someone promotes an event by claiming that proceeds will support a scholarship, a memorial fund, or a charitable cause, there are often surprisingly few legal requirements to ensure that those funds actually go where they are promised. This loophole allows opportunistic promoters to use emotional appeals to increase ticket sales, gain publicity, or enhance their reputation, all without fulfilling the promises they make to the public. In the Wilson case, Boosie's claims about a memorial scholarship gave the appearance of honor and community support, but in reality, no money was ever set aside to fund the scholarship. This misuse of a grieving family's loss for profit served as a wake-up call for lawmakers, universities, and the broader community, demonstrating how easy it is for tragedy to be commodified if there are no checks in place. The emotional consequences for the family were profound. They had to relive their grief repeatedly, not just internally, but publicly, as each development in the legal process unfolded. Watching a stranger profit from Caleb's name and image added a constant, painful reminder of their loss. It also forced them to advocate not just for Caleb, but for all families who could potentially face similar exploitation in the future. Their struggle showed that protecting the memory of a deceased loved one sometimes requires battling systems and individuals who are indifferent to human suffering, highlighting the intersection between morality, law, and community responsibility. Ultimately, this situation served as a stark lesson about the dangers of performative charity and the potential for abuse when celebrities or influencers mix profit motives with supposed community support. Boosie's case showed how someone could publicly project goodwill while privately causing immense harm, emphasizing the need for transparency, accountability, and legal safeguards to protect vulnerable families. It also highlighted the power of social media and public perception in these scenarios, demonstrating how carefully curated narratives can manipulate public sentiment while masking underlying exploitation. For the Wilson family, each day of this ordeal reinforced the importance of standing up against unethical practices, of asserting legal and moral rights, and of ensuring that Caleb's legacy was remembered authentically and respectfully, rather than being hijacked for someone else's financial gain. When someone promises that proceeds from an event will go to charity, the expectation is that those funds will be used to help others or support a meaningful cause. Surprisingly, however, there are very few legal requirements in place to ensure that such promises are actually fulfilled. This lack of oversight creates a loophole that allows people to make charitable claims without ever following through, which is exactly what happened in the case of Caleb Wilson. The Wilson family's experience has forced lawmakers and regulators to consider stronger protections for families who are dealing with tragedy and the potential exploitation of their loved ones. Caleb Wilson was more than just a student. He was a talented musician, a dedicated member of Southern University's Human Jukebox, and a young man with dreams, aspirations, and a bright future. His legacy should be remembered through the music he loved, the passion he brought to every performance, and the important conversations his death sparked about hazing culture across colleges and universities. Unfortunately, instead of honoring his memory in a meaningful way, his name became embroiled in a legal battle over exploitation, false advertising, and corporate opportunism. The Wilson family, who were still grieving the sudden and tragic loss of their son, found themselves forced to step into a public role as advocates, not only for hazing prevention but also for the protection of deceased students' identities and memories from commercial misuse. They had to navigate legal proceedings, respond to media attention, and challenge a situation where a grieving family's pain was being leveraged for profit. The broader HBCU community also took notice. Students, alumni, and faculty recognized the dangers of blindly trusting promoters or organizations with ties to their campuses, understanding that the exploitation of tragedy can reach beyond one family and affect entire communities. Southern University, in particular, faced the difficult task of managing the reputational damage caused by having its campus, students, and institutional logos associated with this controversy during what should have been a period of healing and reflection. Today, Boosie is confronting potential legal consequences that could include fraud charges, consumer protection violations, and substantial fines. The Wilson family continues to fight to protect their son's memory while navigating ongoing legal proceedings. Their struggle has highlighted the broader issue of how easily tragedy can be commodified and exploited by those seeking personal or financial gain. The Louisiana Attorney General has sent a clear message: profiting from someone else's loss comes with accountability. Evidence already available to the public paints a stark picture of Boosie's actions. He used a deceased student's name and image to promote a for-profit festival, falsely claimed to have created a scholarship, ignored the family's repeated requests to cease using their son's likeness, and then portrayed himself as the victim when authorities intervened. This situation demonstrates how individuals can exploit a community's grief for personal gain, manipulating emotions and presenting a facade of charity while reaping financial rewards. Boosie identified an opportunity in Caleb's death and immediately acted to capitalize on it. He created promotional materials that appeared to honor Caleb's legacy, promised a scholarship he never actually funded, and leveraged the family's loss to sell more tickets. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how easily it could have been avoided. If Boosie had approached the Wilson family with transparency, asked for their permission, and genuinely funded a scholarship to support students in Caleb's name, the outcome could have honored the young man's memory instead of turning it into a legal and moral controversy. Instead, he chose to exploit tragedy, and when confronted, he played the victim, further amplifying the pain he had caused. At its core, this case is about more than just Boosie. It raises fundamental questions about how society treats tragedy and whether communities will allow individuals to profit off grief without accountability. The Louisiana Attorney General's actions demonstrate that the law recognizes the harm caused by exploiting loss for personal gain and that families who have suffered such tragedies deserve protection. Boosie had an opportunity to make a positive impact, to honor a young man's life, and to contribute meaningfully to his community. Instead, he prioritized profit over morality, deception over honesty, and self-interest over compassion. Now, he is facing the consequences of those choices, and no social media posts, hospital visits, or public statements can erase the exploitation that occurred. The investigation continues, but one fact remains undeniable. Using a deceased student's likeness to sell tickets, without consent or genuine charitable intent, is not only morally reprehensible, it is potentially illegal. Boosie is about to discover that in the world of accountability, actions like these carry real and serious repercussions.